Children experience domestic abuse in many different ways. Some children will have very outward signs, and other children will become very quiet and insular. No two children experience domestic abuse in the same way. It very much depends on their level of understanding and the kind of support mechanisms they have around them. Certainly, when you think about domestic abuse, sometimes children will be more prone to aggressive behaviours. They may also have physical ramifications caused by stress, such as upset stomachs. They may show some signs of aggression. They may start bedwetting, night terrors. They can also become very quiet and withdrawn.
So one way that a professional can recognise if a child is experiencing domestic abuse is a change in behaviour. If they're becoming more disruptive at school, or maybe even more withdrawn, or even more stressed. And domestic abuse can trigger a long-term stress response in children that can lead to toxic stress, and that can lead to difficulties in education and in school. They can start to lash out, they can have trouble concentrating on what a teacher's saying. They're too busy kind of like focusing on what else is going on around them because they're so used to having to kind of figure out what's going on in the home and be alert.
Professionals tend to know the children they're working with, so if they think there's anything different about the behaviour, or a child is not eating or stressing or anxiety, then they can look out for them signs. Problems at school, especially with older children, behaviour changes, not wanting to learn, withdrawing, again violence against peers, showing just behaviour that they wouldn't normally show. If a child's behaviour changes, it normally suggests that there's something not right or there's something going on at home.
Sudden lack of attendance in the morning at school could indicate that there is something going on in the home, maybe domestic abuse, maybe because the non-violent parent is maybe too tired from like arguments or fights the night before. Maybe they have an injury from the night before and they just can't kind of get themselves together to get the children to school on time, and so they may end up being late, or they might even end up being taken by a family friend or another family member if the non-violent parent doesn't want to leave the house for whatever reason, whether that is an injury, whether that's anything related to domestic abuse, such as depression and anxiety in parents as well, which means that they just physically can't kind of get themselves emotionally ready to get the kids ready for school, which is a lot in the morning as well. So attendance and then not turning up to school at all, that can also be an indicator of something else going on in the home that might be domestic abuse. Sexually harmful behaviour can be an indicator if there is sexually abusive behaviour in the home between the adults in the home. The children can pick that up, they can witness it, and then mimic that behaviour at school with other children. They won't necessarily understand what it is that they're doing, they just know that it happens at the home and they just end up recreating that, and they won't understand that they could be causing harm to another child, but that is a good indicator that something else is going on in the home that might be sexually domestically abusive. Wearing clothes that aren't weather appropriate, so like long sleeve t-shirts or jumpers in warm weather to maybe hide bruising, if they have got involved in a physical altercation with the family. They'll sometimes also make comments as well. They can just make little comments sometimes that are like, mummy doesn't like it when daddy does this, or daddy doesn't like it when mummy does this. Little things like that can be said once or twice that if they're on their own might just seem like, nothing too much. But along with other indicators like the school attendance issues, like, maybe self-harm, depression, anxiety, that can really build a picture of what might be going on in the home and could indicate domestic abuse going on in the home.